Good day, folks. We really appreciate everyone joining our call today. Although we've been fortunate enough to continue making equipment available with convenient online tools, we sure miss being in person with our customers. So it means a lot to us that you've taken the time to join us today. My name's Warren Wechter, and I have the privilege of helping our inspections, setup, and administrative teams as the Vice President of Operations for Canada. I've been with Ritchie Brothers Auctioneers for about 20 years in a variety of roles, helping both our sales and operations teams. This is the first of 3 virtual events leading up to our big May auction in Edmonton. In addition to this event, we'll also have a session on Tuesday of this week, highlighting some advice on how to get the information you need to bid confidently on the equipment in our events. And on Wednesday, we'll provide some information on fleet management tools that are available through Ritchie Brothers. While all 3 sessions are being hosted in conjunction with the Edmonton sale, I think you'll find the information can be used across any of our platforms or in a variety of ways within your business. I encourage you to take advantage of all 3. Today, our focus is cross-border shopping. I'm joined by some special guests from PCB Customs Brokers, whom I will introduce in a minute. Together, we hope to give you some valuable information about purchasing items from other countries and getting them across the border to put them to work. I worked for Ritchie Brothers based out of Southeast Asia for several years. While I was there, I observed that it's really common to buy and move equipment across borders. But when I returned to Canada, I recognized that the practice is not as common here in North America. Moving equipment across borders isn't as daunting as many of us think. You just need some basic information and the right people on your team to assure a smooth process. In a supply-constrained environment like many of us are facing today, we're probably going to have to look further afield for the equipment we need to run our businesses. We hope to remove some of the hesitation by arming you with information and introducing PCB Customs Brokers, who would be happy to partner with anyone who can utilize the services they offer. If you have any questions during the next 25 minutes, please feel free to post them using the chat function. We'll either answer them live or respond later, depending on the time available. Without further delay, I'm excited to pass things over to the real experts, Gloria Turhar and Brianna Leninger.
All right. Thank you for patching in today. We're excited to be able to share this content with you. Some of the things we're going to go over today is how to determine admissibility into the US and Canada, some of the labeling requirements that you're going to face when moving goods cross-border, the difference between country of origin and country of shipping. This is something that can trip up importers, new and seasoned, free trade agreement eligibility. Taking advantage of these are going to help you save money on your landed costs when you move those goods, as well as your documentation requirements. So let's start out by this slide. Things to look at before you buy. So before you buy, before you bid, you want to make sure that the products you're bidding on or buying are going to be able to meet the destination where you want them to go. So some of the things you want to do is you want to check to make sure that the product conforms to US standards and all applicable US regulations. All goods, whether manufactured domestically in the US or whether they're foreign made, must meet the US standards. So some of the questions that you want to ask yourself, does it bear the US conformity labels? So if you're purchasing equipment, trailers, trucks, those kinds of things, you want to make sure that they're labeled with your EPA and DOT stickers. You want to make sure that that label's fully intact. Sometimes people run into issues because the label's on there, but because it's used equipment, it's been worn away, or it's only partially there. That can trip you up at the border. That can hold the goods because they may have to be relabeled. Customs wants to make sure that they can see those clearly. You want to make sure that the product's been thoroughly cleaned. All machinery that comes in is inspected by USDA, and they're looking for the dirt and the bugs and anything possible to make sure that there's no threat to US agriculture. And you want to see if the goods have been modified. There's many goods that they may be US made, but once they left, they were modified. And in many cases, if they've been modified, they're not admissible. Or to be admissible, they have to be brought back to US standards. And you want to see if it's been marked with country of origin. I would say country of origin is one of those areas that really trip people up on the marking. And there's a lot of detentions, delays, seizures that happen for non-properly marked goods. So we want to take a good look at that, which we'll do later in the presentation. So as I said, all goods manufactured in the U.S. Must meet, or all goods coming into the U.S. must meet U.S. standards, and that's regardless of where they were manufactured. On vehicles and equipment, often many cases we see, especially between the U.S. and Canada, is you see goods that have been brought in, say, an incomplete chassis, where it's been brought up, but then it's completed later in Canada. And in that case, it's not going to bear that labeling, and it may not meet those regulations. So if you're looking at a good such as that may have come in as an incomplete chassis, you may have to get it relabeled. It's not hard. It's very easy to do. Often those Canadian finishers are able to supply that labeling, but you want to have that in place before the goods come across. You also want to see what the country of origin is. Country of origin is going to determine so much for you. It's going to determine whether it meets free trade agreement eligibility. It's going to impact your duty. So making sure that you know what the country of origin is and making sure that it's properly marked is a really good step to make sure that your trip across the border is a smooth one. So like I said, one of the issues that trip up importers, new and old, is that concept of country of origin versus country of shipping. Goods are often bought in one country and subsequently moved to another. So just because it's coming out of Canada doesn't necessarily mean the country of origin is Canada. So some of the things to ask yourself, how do you determine country of origin? Well, country of origin is the country of manufacture, production, or growth. The purpose of it is to notify the end user who's going to be getting the product, let them know where that product was made. And country of origin, how it's marked really matters. So you'll see on a manufactured good, usually it's on the packaging or it may be on the product itself. So there's some rules to go by. Although the US has no official language, country of origin is required to be marked in English. And sometimes we will see products coming out of Canada that are marked in French and they have to be remarked. So you want to make sure that it's on there as permanently as the article will allow, in a conspicuous place and of a size that can be easily identified. If it's this big, you may have to remark your product. So you want to make sure that you've checked that box. And as I said, free trade agreement eligibility, the first step is the questions asked, what is the country of origin? Just because you purchase it in Canada, US, or Mexico doesn't mean it qualifies for USMCA or CUSMA. You want to look at the classification. Now, most products fall under USMCA CUSMA. Most of them do, but not all of them do. So you want those two steps. What's the country of origin and what's the classification? And most importantly, you want to make sure you have proof of that because you may be asked to substantiate that claim. So you want to make sure that before you ship, you have your statements and certificates in order so that you make that duty-free claim. Without them, you can't make the claim, and that can end up costing you quite a bit of money down the road. An important thing to note, this was a big change between USMCA and NAFTA, is that in order to get the full benefits, you must have everything you need to make that claim up front when the goods enter. Sometimes people will get a duty bill and they'll say, well, wait a second, it was country of origin Canada, it should have been duty-free. Now you can file for a correction and apply to get a refund from the government for that duty, but under USMCA, they're not going to give you all of it. They're only going to refund you a portion of it back. So your best case to save money is to make sure that you have all of that right up front when the goods cross. And also keep in mind that you must keep those records for 5 years from the date of importation. Customs has 5 years to come back and request proof of your claim to make sure that what you listed is the truth. And if they find out 4 years down the road that you can't substantiate it, they will send you a duty bill with interest. So make sure if you're making that claim, you put them in someplace safe so that those records are available if and when requested. And the next part is invoice requirements. So once you've determined what your classification is, your country of origin, you're going to want to list out these check boxes here on your invoice. Any one of these missing on your documentation can cause a delay at the border and can spur an inspection. So make sure that you have all of this listed out, your currency, country of origin, classification, full name and address for all the parties involved, including their tax identification numbers, and any partner government agency requirements. So this really comes in on used goods and equipment, the partner government agency requirements. So you want to make sure that you have pictures of that labeling. When we send your entry to customs, we have to supply those pictures. Without those pictures, again, it can cause a delay. It can cause an inspection. It can cause the shipment to be on hold until they can confirm that. You want to make sure if there's any applicable statements of conformity for the manufacturer that are required, that you have those in your documentation. For vehicles and equipment, you want to have a VIN. And in some cases, there's very few cases where non-conforming equipment and goods can come in, but they must come in under the permission of EPA and NHTSA. And you can get that permission, absolutely. There's many cases where we get it, but it takes weeks. Those agencies can be really backed up. So if you fall into that, if you've purchased non-conforming equipment and you still want to bring it in and you're going for permission, make sure that you have that in place, a place to store those goods while you get that permission. And after this, I turn it over to Gloria for shipping into Canada.
All right, so I'm going to touch base on shipping to Canada now. Shipping to Canada is can be quite similar to shipping to the US, but because we have different government agencies, they tend to treat some details a little bit differently. So first, I'm going to speak about admissibility. Like shipping to the US, you need to make sure that the product that you buy is admissible into Canada. There's two main regulation or government agencies that regulate your goods, that regulate self-propelled and towable units and other pieces of heavy equipment. The first one is Transport Canada. So they regulate your self-propelled and towable units and equipment when they are roadworthy. If they're not roadworthy, the goods are still reported to the Registrar of Imported Vehicles. And there's other exemptions to Transport Canada requirements, such as trailers that are greater than 102 inches wide. So anything that's self-propelled or towable must meet Canadian road safety standards unless they're one of those exempted items. One of the things that you need to, I get horrible dry mouth, I admit this, and I haven't figured out how to deal with that yet. So Transport Canada will regulate your self-propelled and towable units to make sure that they meet Canadian road safety standards. To confirm the admissibility for those items, you can contact the Registrar of Imported Vehicles via email or phone, and they will be able to tell you if your product is required to meet road safety standards or exempt from those standards. Even when items are exempt, they're still reported to Transport Canada because the provinces and territories sometimes require those units to be licensed. And if you skip that step when you import them, if you move that unit from one province to another, you might run into the problem where you can't get it licensed. Like Alberta has different licensing requirements than British Columbia. We have run into people who have imported something like a backhoe or a tractor into Alberta, had no problems with it, and then when they moved it to British Columbia, they found out that they couldn't get it licensed the way the province needed to because it wasn't reported at time of importation. So be careful to check that requirement and make sure that the declaration is made when the goods are imported. The next government agency is quite the long name. It's Environment and Climate Change Control Canada. For short, we call it Environment Canada, or ECCC. ECCC regulates the engines that are in equipment. Engines must meet the emission standard for the year that they're manufactured in. And again, admissibility can be confirmed directly with ECCC. By email. I've never tried phoning them. Email, though, is quite efficient. It takes a couple of days, and they'll want copies of the labels that are on the engine, and they'll be able to tell you if your engine's allowed in. One thing to be aware of is transition engines. Transition engines are engines that are manufactured to meet the emission standards of a previous year. Depending on the engine class and type, transition engines actually aren't allowed into Canada. So if you have a machine that has a transition engine in it, you might be faced with the fact that it's inadmissible by Environment and Climate Change Control Canada. And like the United States, all equipment must be clean and free of soil. At time of importation, the CBSA will do an inspection on behalf of the CFIA to make sure that there's no soil, again, to protect, like the US, Canadian agriculture. Also, when you're exporting units from the United States, there's two types of export filings that must be made. And this is only required, though, for self-propelled units. It's not required for towable or stationary units. The first is the AES filing to US Census Bureau. And once that is filed, you'll be issued an ITN number, which is proof of the filing. The next step is filing 72-hour notice with US Customs. And that is exactly what it sounds like. Notice has to be given to US Customs 72 hours or more prior to the goods being exported. US Customs is going to review the documents and make sure that no stolen or leased goods are being exported from the United States. That 72-hour notice requires the ITN number from the AES filing, or else US CBP will not authorize your 72-hour notice. Once your 72-hour notice is processed, the US CBP will advise the earliest date of crossing that the goods are allowed to exit the United States. And one thing to keep in mind, though, with the 72-hour notice is that not every US port of exit has 72-hour notice availability. So when you file that notice, it'll also tell you what port the goods need to cross at. And then when the goods physically do leave the United States, original documents need to be presented to US CBP in order for them to physically stamp documents like the title to say that the goods have been legally exported from the US. If you don't file your 72-hour notice and your unit shows up at the border, you can actually be fined. I've heard of people getting fines because US Customs says you're not supposed to be here, or you showed up early. We haven't finished doing the check yet on the commodity. And just like the United States, you can take advantage of the free trade agreements, the USMCA or CUSMA, CUSMA for short. The certification of origin requirements are the same as the United States. You need the filled out declaration that has all of the required elements. And in Canada, claims for refunds can be made within 4 years from the date of final accounting into Canada. And Canada's a little bit nicer than the US. If you make that claim and the certification is valid, they'll actually refund the entire amount of duty that you paid instead of just a portion of it. And again, like the United States, country of origin and shipping definitions are the exact same in Canada. Country of origin is the place where something is manufactured, and country of shipping is the place it's shipped from. So I'm just going to take a moment to quickly review the documentation requirements. The Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA, has minimum documentation requirements. Again, very, very similar to the United States. You have to have a detailed description of the goods, value, currency, and the value is the price, of course, that's paid or payable for that item when you win it at auction or if you just buy it flat out. You need to have a quantity, the country of origin, so the place the goods manufactured, name and address of the seller, name and address of the manufacturer, especially important for Environment and Climate Change Control Canada, because they're going to want that information depending on the equipment. Transport Canada also asks for the same information. You need to know where the goods are going to in Canada. That can affect the import requirements. And also identify clearly on the documents who the importer of record is. If that information is not clearly identified, then you can actually, the goods can be cleared through customs in the name of the wrong importer, and then corrections have to be made. For the participating government agencies, the PGAs, for Transport Canada, for anything that's self-propelled or towable, they're going to want a copy of the title, the MSO, Manufacturer's Statement of Origin, or a Certificate of No Title. And for Environment and Climate Change Control Canada, we need proof of the conformity with the emission standards. So is there an EPA label or national emissions mark affixed to that engine? And unlike the US, we don't actually require a copy of the picture right now. I say right now because regulations are always evolving, but it is really highly recommended to have a picture of that to ensure that your product is going to be admissible into Canada. So how can we help? As a customs broker, as Warren said earlier, we're very happy to partner with anyone who wants to import into the US and Canada. We can help you check the admissibility requirements with the relevant participating government agencies. We will review your documents for completeness and accuracy, and we can report the goods to customs and the required participating government agencies on your behalf so that you can have a seamless move of your goods either into the US or into Canada. If needed, we can pay the duties and taxes on your behalf, or we can pay the applicable duties and taxes on your behalf, or you can pay them directly, and we can set up your customs entry and provide you with the release status when you're good to cross the border. We have a handy guide for shipping equipment cross-border. This guide contains the minimum standards for imports into the US and Canada. It breaks them out by vehicle type, as well as showing you the requirements for importation into US and Canada for each of those vehicles. It includes also the required documentation and the steps that are needed to import your goods into the US and Canada. Does anyone have any questions?
Brianna and Gloria, thank you so much for presenting today. I think, we've tried to give a fairly detailed general overview of things, but obviously as customers become more targeted on the specific assets that they're considering purchasing and trying to move across border, they can certainly review the admissibility guide. And if they still have questions, I would absolutely encourage them to reach out to PCB and explore the specific asset that they're looking at. I don't see any questions coming in on the chat, but we'll give it maybe another minute or two and just see if there is anything. Awesome. Well, I think with that, maybe we'll wrap up. I really appreciate everybody again taking the time to attend, and hopefully this was useful to everyone. Please don't hesitate to reach out to either Ritchie Brothers or PCB if there's anything we can do to help you as you consider a cross-border purchase. Take care.